In the previous lesson, we had talked briefly about booleans and how we would use booleans as conditions. And that's one of the things that you can do with JavaScript, is that you can have these conditional statements. And conditional statements are something, so I'm going to set a value of a and I'm going to equal it to true. And now I'm going to use this value of a and I'm going to put a condition on it. So if a equals true, then I want something to happen. So I'm going to just do console log, or maybe I can do document write, just to mix things up a little bit. So document write, and I'm going to write a is true after checking. So now when I go out to the page and refresh it, we should have somewhere over here written that a is true after checking, because the condition did a check of the code. And this is what the condition is. It found that the condition of a is true, and it output that code that met that condition. So essentially it does a check to make sure that this value is what we're looking for, and if it was actually false, then nothing would happen. So if I go out now and if I refresh it, it's going to check that value of a. It's going to go through it and it's going to say, okay, well, a is now false, so I don't really have to output anything. And the good thing about conditions is you can actually have as many conditions as you want. So you could do something like else if a equals true, or if a equals false. So I should just change that around a little bit. Then we can have a bunch of other conditions. Is not false. So we're not actually checking to be true, even though if it's not false, that means it's true. But just for the sake of this argument, we want to see if a is if it's true, and here we're doing a check to see if a is false. And if a is false, so here I should write a is not true, just to be a little bit more exact. And here we know that a is false because we've declared it as false. So this statement, so a equals false, actually comes back true, and it should output that code that we've got within that condition. So when that condition is true and it gets met, then it outputs the code. So a is false after checking. Now we can also simplify this as well. We can do something like else. So we don't necessarily need that, because we can check to see if a is true, and we could do, maybe we could add in the else over here. So there's not actually going to be a condition. So if it checks to see if this is true, and I'm going to just quote this out. So it's no longer going to be a Boolean, it's going to be a string. And so this one should still come up true, and I'm just going to change this to hello. A is something other than true or false. So what's going to happen now when the browser loads? Variable a is going to be set as hello. It's going to look at this condition and it's going to say, okay, well, this is a conditional statement. It's going to check the value of a, and if this condition gets met, then it will run this piece of code. It's got an else if, and if this condition gets met, then it's going to run this piece of code. And if none of these conditions are met and it's still running, it's still searching, it's going to actually output this piece of code. So this is how you would write a conditional statement. If this condition is met, output this. If this condition is met, output this. If anything else, then just output this. So we refresh it, and we should get the last one being output here. So something other than true or false, because we've checked for true, we've checked for false, and we see that we've got this value. So using operators like equal then, we can also do not equal then, and we can also use greater than symbols. So if we had a numeric value for a, so if a, I'm just going to get rid of this one here, and I'm going to do an else. So a now has a value of 5, so if a is greater than 4, a is condition met. No conditions met. So if a is greater than 4, it'll write out condition met. If a is not meeting this condition and we're still running, it'll do the else code and it'll just write no conditions met. So we see that the condition is met because a is greater than 5. Now if I go back out here and if I do something like a equals 2, go back out, refresh it. So a is no longer greater than 2, so the no conditions met gets shown. Also do something like this. So if a is not equal to 4, the condition is not met, and if it is, then so if a is not equal to 4, so this is one of those negative ones that if this condition comes back, if it matches this condition, then this code gets output. If nothing gets matched, then this code gets output. So we'll just see here that a is equal to 2. If a is not equal to 4, then the first condition gets met. Otherwise, there's no conditions are met. And also, within these operators, sometimes you might see this absolute value. And what this means is that we're checking to see if the variable, the type of variable it is, so if it's an integer, if it's a string, is absolutely equal to this. So in this condition, a will be true. So the condition gets met. But if we do something like this, where we're actually comparing a string value of 2 to the numeric value of 2, on the absolute, the condition doesn't get met. And if we remove out one of these equal signs, so we're going to be comparing a string value of 2 to a numeric value of 2. And when we refresh it, do you think the condition is going to be met or the condition's not going to be met? And the condition is met because we're not actually looking at the type of variable it is. We're just looking at the actual value that's being returned. So 2 is equal to 2 in this case. So we're only using the 2 equal signs. But if you do want to make an absolute condition, then you'd have to use the 3 equal signs. And for practice, there's quite a lot of these different types of operators and conditions. So it is worthwhile to play around with this a little bit and to understand the logic that's going behind this conditional statement and how it works.